This is Alexandra from Percent.
And this is Paul from the Time Repair Corporation.
And we both welcome you to our monthly interchange.
A meeting of the minds, people reaching outside of themselves in an attempt to find a deeper understanding of perspectives.
And it is through this coming together of perspectives that we hope to serve the divergent, the polymaths, the non-conforming thinkers, people who don't fit into rules. In short, the people we like to call angels of chaos.
And we want to. No,
I love that title.
Right, that's a fair response, I think. So we want to achieve that by inviting these troublemakers from around the globe and digging into their experiences and their unique views.
Views which we are bringing forth with models for personal, global, and sustainable change, so that we can design a world that is fit for the future we want. But there's another dimension to it as well.
We're trying to grow that conversation to make sure that more people are able to weigh in and contribute to this actual practical creation of tomorrow. So reach out to us and let's do our best to make this a borderless interchange.
Today's guest is one of those polymaths who really cover such a wide span of disciplines. So he studied horticulture. He got diplomas in certifications in education, in drama, and in public health. He's now a UK qualified teacher. He is a Black Magic design training partner. He is a certified Da Vinci Resolve trainer. He is involved in acting for television and for theater. He's involved in voiceover. He's involved in film media training. He's involved in employability training. We can go on. And the most interesting thing is that for the past 30 years, he has been training, supporting people from a diversity of backgrounds, from different ethnic backgrounds, people who are young, people who come from disadvantaged areas, people who are prisoners, people who are neurodiverse, people who have disabilities. And it's this pathway of growth that he leads them on through a variety of different tools, methods, approaches that are very much anchored in performing arts and in technology. He is based in the UK, but he's originally from New Zealand. So yes. Please welcome with me, Lance Phillips. How are you doing, Lance?
Oh, good, thank you. That's such a lovely introduction. It's interesting when you hear someone describe your whole history back to you. Yeah. So, I find whatever discipline I've done, it's been really hard to fit into it because I don't fit the usual model of who someone should be within that discipline. So when I did my horticulture degree, I did pass it. There's nothing wrong with my horticultural knowledge. But people would say, well, you're doing the wrong degree because you're quite animated and you're quite interesting when you tell stories, and horticulture students aren't really meant to be interesting, and animators are meant to be quite quiet and reserved. And I don't know, I got told off by a lecturer when I did my final year presentation. He said, "You're too Spanish. You're using your hands when you're describing things." I mean, I didn't really realize that was one of the qualifications to do horticulture. I couldn't use my hands to describe things. So
do not have Spanish hands.
No, well, no. I'm actually mixed race, so I do have a little bit of Spanish in me. So maybe it's come from that. But it was interesting actually, because my background's diverse in itself, but it was interesting studying. And when I did horticulture, I was very shy, and I chose that sort of degree because I wanted to not be traditional. I didn't want to, because my father at the time was like a computer manager for an architecture firm, and I never saw him. And he'd come home very rarely and very late. And I ended up having to look after myself pretty much as in between. So I'd come home the weekends and I'd go to boarding school, so a grammar school. And just in case anyone thinks like I'm from a posh background because I went to a boarding school, no, you know, so I'm from a working class family. My father was a builder, and then he was trying to escape that sort of thing. So he banned me from sounding like a Kiwi, which is why I've always had a rather English accent, even in New Zealand. And then also sent me off to boarding school. But yeah, it was cheaper to come home for the weekends. And yeah, so I mean, that's partly, I don't know how interesting that is, but you know, that whole aspect of education, I went to a comprehensive first and then a boarding school afterwards. And then from there, I went to university. So, you know, so I know the difference from myself as a learner, the differences between a comprehensive in my teenage years and also a grammar school. And personally, I didn't really like the grammar school system because they really pigeonholed you into one thing only, right? So I wanted to study biology and I wasn't allowed to because I was in bottom set at grammar school and I was in top set. So set is like, you know, based on your IQ. I was in top set and comprehensive, or second to top set and comprehensive. And I found that there was a slight pigeonholing in comprehensive as well, but at least you had a wider variety of things you could learn. Whereas in grammar school was very much into the sort of intellectual subjects. And because I was in the worst class for science, I wasn't allowed to learn biology. And we studied horticulture at school. So it was my way to get out of the classroom. I hated the sort of confines of like my dad with his stress of an office space being stuck in front of a computer. And this is, you know, decades ago. Now we're all stuck in front of a computer during COVID, but back then that seemed, yeah, ironic, isn't it? Yeah, he's stuck in front of a computer, but in an office, he didn't get to move, and the stress of interpersonal conflicts at work and all that. And so I did horticulture at school, when you got outside and you got down with the environment and growing things and learn how to look after animals. And very lucky to have a school farm. And so I really loved that. But the biology bit which of course relates to horticulture, they wouldn't let me do that as a discrete subject. I just had to do general science. And I remember studying up because one of my motivations was, because I was in the bottom set at a grammar school, was the bottom set of any school, there's really bad behavior, you know. So if you really want to learn and everyone else doesn't, you get picked on. And there's, back then, you know, you get picked on with scalpels because people would have scalpels and Bunsen burners. Yeah, seriously. So, and we had a teacher that was just, you know, she was lovely, but she wasn't very good. So, because she was trying to be mumsy, but had no sense of discipline, that you can't learn unless you feel safe. So I definitely did not feel particularly safe in an environment. And it's a boys' school. So, you know, you can just imagine all those hormones running wild in your puberty years. So we had the head of science come and teach us for a bit, and everyone settled down a bit more. And I think I had to go. No, that's right. I went into his class briefly because she was ill. She had a breakdown or something. So they split the boys up into different classes, and I was in his class briefly. I learned something. I learned biology. It was really exciting. I really wanted to stay there, and so I pleaded with him, please, sir, don't send me back. I want to be in your classroom. And he said, oh, but you've missed a whole term. I said, give me the books to read and I'll study up on it. I did, actually. I studied up on biology and DNA and Mendelssohn, I think it was, you know, the whole the monks that just discovered DNA.
Mendel.
And yeah, Mendel, that's it, Mendel. And yeah, I went back and I studied that during my Easter break, and came back and I said, look, I did this, and he says, very admirable, but no, I've got to return you back to your teacher, which is a shame, you know. I mean, I personally think, yeah, because I am a qualified teacher now. I personally and I do know this happens in the UK system, we assess people when they start their journey, particularly secondary school, and then at that point, whatever's happening in their lives isn't taken into account that can change. So, and I, as I described, I was coming from a very stressful situation. My home life was very stressful. So then going to boarding school, my ability to cognitively, pass the different IQ tests to get further up that situation meant that I was stuck in the sort of bottom set. And then there was other boys that just didn't want to be there at the school, and then you're kept there for 3-4 years. So in that sort of environment, you just can't learn, even though you've got a passion for learning. You just can't learn because it's unsafe to learn because everyone else sees you as a threat because you're really enthusiastic, or like the term still exists today, teacher's pet. No, I just want to learn for myself. I enjoy learning. I'm not trying to be a pet for anyone. That's a slave, really. So I went to university, and that was really interesting because it was a great time, 3 years, actually 4, because I did fail a couple of papers. I had to resit them. But 3 years of university was a time to grow up and leave the school mentality behind. And actually, I got better grades at university than I ever did at school, and that sort of testifies, so at school I was lucky to get a C. And my teachers would get frustrated with me because they said, you're so verbally intelligent, we can ask you all the questions, you know the answers, but when it comes to this time limited exam, you keep failing them. I remember my English teacher saying, oh, I'm so frustrated with you, Phillips, because they called us by surnames back then. He said, you should be able to pass this, and I would go, well, I'm doing my best. Why are you getting frustrated with me? So it's amazing that the education system hasn't changed that much, that we get frustrated with students rather than change the system to help them. Yeah. So a time limited exam, and in what situations we actually really, even in work, I've been working my whole life. I've never been in a situation where I got to regurgitate knowledge within 60 minutes, very fast. And a variety of different parts of knowledge, that just doesn't happen in real life. And I personally think, my current, so let's fast forward to this recently, I've been working with, so I've got I have had an EU funded contract, which is also UK government funded contract, what they call the Education and Skills Funding Agency. So they fund adult ed here in the UK. So it's match funded with the EU. And that's for 16 to 24-year-olds who are unemployed. And pretty much the common experience of the vast majority of them is they've had a bad experience at school and they weren't really valued at school. Hence, they didn't learn, didn't get the grades. And then they've left school and they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's not because they're stupid, they're incredibly bright, but they just need to be given those opportunities. Anyway, I can sense you want to ask a question, so go for it.
Yeah, it's fantastic hearing about this experience yet again, because we hear about this a lot in interchange. People who, again, you didn't quite fit, so they didn't know what to do with you. So you had maybe a bad experience in the process, and this seems to be much more common than the reverse, which we're told is true. But I really like the idea of you making horticulture sort of a back door to biology and to the study of life and to moving forward. But what I'd really like to know is a little bit more about Lance Phillips. I've heard about a lot of different Lance Phillipses here.
Yeah.
How many are there, and who are they? Which is most central to what you see as yourself?
Oh, wow, that's a deep question. I don't even know I've got an answer for that. Yeah, I mean, I think sense of self. If I did a time machine and I put myself, I was just saying this to someone yesterday, actually. If I put myself in a time machine, my young self in my 20s, and fast forwarded to now, I would not even believe who I am now. you know. So I just freak out, I think. So I definitely, if someone like Doctor Who came and said, come and see your past self, I think, no, that's a bad idea. Because back then, my sense of self was just very shy, socially awkward. You know, it was scared of people, really. And I think part of that was not fitting into those sort of boxes of perception of what people wanted me to be, but also me being an extreme people pleaser. So, and I think there's still there's some aspect of my nature is still a people pleaser in that sense. And I don't see it as a completely bad thing. I do see it as, in its extreme form, it is a bad thing. Of course it is, you know, because you do lose a sense of self through pleasing other people. Because something I did learn, and it took some time to learn this, is so I spent a lot of my time in my 20s flipping. So what I mean by that is, you know, you say something to please someone because you want them to like you, and then somebody else says something completely opposite, but you want them to like you as well. So you agree with them, and then you're flipping back between different opinions and stuff, and that doesn't create a huge stable sense of self for yourself or other people, and you end up not being liked because people don't know who you are.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So so it's counterintuitive, really. So you're trying to agree with everyone so that you can be liked, so then no one likes you because they don't know who you are. So I then discovered I had to just be myself. And that's a hard one if you're a people pleaser, because you tend to put yourself off to one side and agree with everybody. So what did I discover? Who am I? Well, I'm someone who, well, I'm a byproduct of my background as much as anything else, but I've got a brother with a disability, so he lives in the home. So he's got Down syndrome, and part of who I am is someone that I don't like, not just for myself, but for other people. I don't like seeing people pigeonholed or told they can't do things because they've got a label. Never liked that about myself. And one of those things, and that actually happened to me, not just my brother. So I was in primary school. I was put in a special unit. So because I was odd in classroom. And so you described my odd behavior. I don't know if you've heard me say this before. And this is the other thing, I'm incredibly transparent. So that throws people, because I don't mind. I am who I am, and if you don't like it, that's fine. You know, I can't change who I am. As long as I'm being polite and sociable and I'm not being rude to other people, that's different. So yeah, I remember being in the classroom, and I think looking back on this, I'd assume with our modern diagnosis of things, people would probably assume I was autistic. So I remember living in this little fantasy world in my head because school was boring. So I would create just an alternative because I hated school, and I got bullied a lot at school. And I remember, I think I was and also I moved a lot because my family upbringing wasn't particularly stable. So I was always moving. And when you're moving school halfway through the school year, everyone else has formed their friendships. You haven't, so you're the new kid on the block. So you either have to assert yourself very strongly. In one school I did. So I was sort of like the top dog at that school for a while. And then I moved and went to another school where I was the bottom dog, so to speak. So I just got exhausted from all this. And so I became incredibly internal. And I think that sort of formed that creativity I've got still now as an actor and as a creator, is being able to have a hugely vivid imagination. So here, describing this. So you remember those wooden flip desks from school? Yeah. Right. So I remember, I can just imagine what the teacher was thinking. So I was lifting the flip desk, and I wanted to see how long I could hold my breath underwater for, because I'd seen something on television, you know, Guinness Book of Records or something like that, or Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, or one of those things, right? And so I was lifting the desk up so it was above my head. Oh no, that's right. That's it. I was holding my breath, so I'd go like this. Like this. Now you just imagine a 9-year-old kid, right? And the teacher at the front of the class seeing a kid do this. Like this, totally oblivious to all the other kids around me, right? Totally oblivious. So they took me out of the class. Didn't ask me why I was doing that, really. They took me out of the class and put me in a special needs class.
They missed the entire point. They just, oh.
Yeah, so I was in the class with people that also got bullied, right? And they had Down syndrome or quite severe special needs and stuff, you know. And in fact, you know, some of them couldn't talk and all sorts. And I was in this class, a special class, and so I saw them getting bullied. You know, so there was one guy that they would tell him to go into the girls' toilets, and he was a boy, and he just like people pleasing. You know, he's got a disability, cognitive disability. He didn't know what was right or wrong, and then he'd go into the girls' toilets and get into trouble. And I just went, no, this is wrong. So next time they did it, they tried it again. I said, stop it, don't you dare do that. And I stood my ground for him. These boys were laughing because they thought it was incredibly funny. But I thought actually the other ones with the disability, this is cruel. And you've got abilities, but you're taking advantage of other people who haven't. So you're sort of squandering the fact that you've got cognitive thought, you've got, you know, both arms and legs that work, and you're not using it to help people, you're using it to destroy people's lives. And I think that is pretty much the sort of social justice aspect for me is really core to who I am, about equality and social justice, and that we treat people with respect, regardless of how we perceive their ability. I know we all make mistakes, don't get me wrong, I'm not an angel, angel of chaos maybe, but definitely not an angel. But I do try my best to make sure I'm a better version of myself. And hopefully I am a better version of who I was in my 20s and so on. So yeah, I've always, virtually every job I've had, I've always been asked to be the union rep because of that sort of sense of strong social justice. Yeah. When I was studying public health, the lecturers asked me to be the student rep. The lecturers, no, that's weird, you know. So that must be a bit of a core to me. But who am I? Can't really say much more than that. There's all sorts of facets to who I am. I'm also pretty creative, I think, maybe.
Yeah. And what you said about social justice, and when you were talking about that, and I was going back to all the things that I said in the introduction, and it's so clear. There's this very strong, powerful golden thread that runs through all the variety of different experiences, and that golden thread stems from this powerful, strong need to be supportive of others.
Yes,
and
that's true.
And the story that you've just told us is in full alignment with the expression of the potential that you have designed and redesigned through variety and through covering a span of disciplines. So it really we can see the parallels between these two. But I also want to run through other parallels, perhaps even more. Let's add more parallels. Let's connect more dots.
Okay.
Because there is this strong component on the human side of social justice, helping others, standing up for what's right, helping the underdog, and giving chances, opportunities to those who did not have the chances of the opportunity. So there's this human side of things. But then there's this entire panoply of creative, artistic, technological components and dots that are connected together. So my question for you is, how, which is perhaps a question that I often ask because I'm biased, how did you connect those dots?
Oh, I don't know still, really. I try. You know, I mean, a good example is the horticulture thing. So, you know, thinking how, you know, how do I ever use that? Because clearly not, the temperament and personality doesn't suit the farmer, you know. And in fact, you have to, I learned quite quickly, you have to have a lot of money or own land to be a farmer. So the only job when you graduate is to work for somebody else on very low wages, even if you got a degree. So, you know, I did take the advice of my lecturers and the other students. So I applied for drama school. In fact, my first job after leaving my degree in horticulture, before I even got into drama school, was acting, which was a bit bizarre because I was so shy. And I think it's maybe those primary school experiences of being able to shut everything else off and inhabit a character that enabled me to act. So I was given the role of Percy in like a dinner theatre improv restaurant, which I've since heard, and I think this is quite key to how I approach things. I've since heard that's really difficult, you know, because with no training, you're going into making up lines for a paying audience, and it's improv. I've met other actors who just hate improvisation, and yeah, and I did it really well, and I know that because the other cast said you're fantastic, and the audiences loved it, and in fact, one of the cast members said he was intimidated by me because he thought I was really that character. And then as soon as I went into that character, I was that character. And then when I finished, I was just me, and it threw him all the time. So I think part of me is I don't see the can't. So I think one of the problems with too much education is we end up learning too much to the point that we feel we need to know more, and then we just can't start. And so if someone tells you that's really difficult, then, and you've got enough knowledge, you understand why it's difficult, then you won't do it. If you're a complete amateur, which I was, but then I was getting paid, or beginner, so I wouldn't say amateur in the sense I was being paid well and people enjoyed it and I kept being paid, you know. So yeah, it's because I didn't realize that you couldn't do it. So I just do it, you know, and I didn't realize it was meant to be difficult. And I found it easy because no one had said it's difficult, if that makes sense. And so I think that psyche, and there have been moments, don't get me wrong, I've been in situations in education when people tell you something's really, really difficult, and I go, oh, it must be really, really difficult. And hence it stifles your ability to do it, because that does affect your mindset. So yeah, I mean, yeah, so drama, and then the other students said, you're really funny. I actually want to be a writer because that's ironic. Yeah. I wanted to be a writer at the time because that meant I didn't have to deal with people. So I kept falling into these different roles. So I spent most of my drama postgrad diploma trying to do writing. But as I was the only student who had ever acted professionally before, so all of the rest of them were doing English lit degrees, like they come from English and usually middle-class backgrounds upwards, and so they knew the difference between a latte and a cappuccino, and I didn't. I just thought it was coffee, you know, and they'd all read Chaucer, and they're quoting from Chaucer, and that, to me, my attire in the horticulture degree was wearing gumboots. They call them Wellingtons in this country, and you know, jeans, and just we call them Swannies, but you know, I had a woolen jumper. And then when I went to Auckland, which is our big city, and you're doing drama, it was everyone's dressed really fancy, and again, we're talking about these sort of cliques of identity. People tend to adopt an identity that suits the job that they're doing. And it's everywhere you go, whatever profession I've seen it in. And so I didn't really feel like I fitted into that either. But they kept asking me to act in their shows, and so I never ended up finishing writing my piece. And there was a reworking of how people see the Bible, so the character of Jesus, but I wanted to see it from a different perspective. So it was interesting anyway. But when I graduated, I didn't want to be an actor. And one of those things I really enjoyed when I was at uni was set design and lighting. and John Hardman at the time was like the key set designer and lighting person for theatre, and I reached out to him because he was our guest tutor, and I really believe education should be based on people who come from industry, who've got some sort of experience, but also not just from industry. They know how to teach, they know how to inspire passion in you, and he inspired passion in me. Right, so I remember we had our final end of year piece. It's a big play that we had to do, and I didn't act in it. And I did. No one else. All these other people my age wanted to be actors and famous and stuff, and I didn't. And so I probably the only person who wanted to do the set design and lighting. They'll go, great, you can do that, you know. So I did. Well, actually, I was co-designer with another woman who wanted to do it as well. So we built this together, and so we designed it together. And I got my uncle, who was a builder. Remember where I come from? Whole family of builders. So he came in to help build the set because I can't hammer a nail straight. And I loved it, really did. And so I reached out to John and I said, look, can I just learn from you? You know, I've graduated, I'd like to be a set designer. Can I learn from you? And he goes, yeah. So he invited me to, like, no pay, but like like work experience type thing. And he invited me to shadow him on Hamlet for the Watershed Theatre in Auckland. So this big show, and Michael Hurst was the lead in it. And if you don't know who Michael was, at the time, he was like our biggest theatre actor. And he was also a director. So he's directing the show as well, and the lead, as often happens, you know. And he was actually one of the leads in Hercules as well, Michael Hurst. So he was like Hercules, like second-hand man, you know, like his best friend. And so I went to this because so John said, like, okay, what I think is a good experience for you, Lance, is to design something from scratch and make it, and then see it in the play. So he gave me the backdrop. There's like some sort of regal sort of I'm trying to remember the play now. So there's a bit where in the Hamlet where you've got the throne room, right? So Hamlet goes to see his uncle. It's a strange story, isn't it? His uncle who's married his mother, and his uncle had killed his father and to marry his mother and get all the wealth. You know, you think about that sort of article, that sort of storyline is usually in the Sun or News of the World now, or News of the World doesn't exist, but yeah, actually that would be a good play. Just do the Sun's version of Hamlet. You know, that would be really interesting, rather than try and make it too historical. But yeah, so I had to do this backdrop behind the throne, and so we had to do research, and so we researched into the time periods and what did medieval sort of backdrops and stuff look like, and we had to get all that together, and then I had to draw up a design based on that, and then I had to make it. So we had to, that's another skill, sewing, right? So grammar school, we didn't learn to sew, because it's not a boys.
Should have added it to the introduction.
Yeah, I should have. I can knit as well. But that's another story, right? Yeah, sewing. So in secondary school, just normal regular secondary school, we all had to go to sewing lessons, boys and girls. But when I went to grammar school, no, that's not a thing you do. This is a boys' school, right? I don't understand this. Yeah. Because, you know, why? Right? Why? You know, does it mean I don't have clothes I need to mend? You know,
right?
But yeah,
I'm forced to sewing. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, right. And cooking. We did cooking at secondary school, but when I went to grammar school, it wasn't an option for boys. Again, why? Yeah. Do boys not have to feed themselves? You know, right. There's something wrong about that. It is appalling, isn't it? And I loved cooking. Actually, there's another story, because I was a cook in a restaurant at one point.
Now you have another dot to connect in horticulture, which is yes. But I love the fact. What I really love about this is that it reminds me actually of a quote by Ray Bradbury, or attributed to him, which is "Jump off a cliff, build your wings on the way down." And what you said about not being afraid to do the shift, to connect the dots, to start something new, start afresh, is something that is actually critical to the growth process. And it gives you a lot of courage to try things that you've never thought you would before, because, hey, what's wrong with it? Let's try it. Let's go for it. Why not? And this is the why not. This why not jump off a cliff? Why not take the risk and build the wings on the way down? And I think this is a critical factor when it comes to really connecting disciplines, because all of a sudden you're not bound to one place. Because once you're bound to one place and you have 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 plus years of experience in that one specific thing, you have so much to lose if you switch. You have so much to lose if you switch. But if you're used to the idea of really merging a lot of different ideas and trying a lot of different things and finding connections in between things, like, for instance, sewing, lighting, acting, behind the scenes, on site, and all of these things. So there's a certain fluidity that comes with it, and that also stems from this courage of, okay, I'm in acting, but why not try also the lighting part? And when I'm lighting, yes, but why not try this as well? Where you're no longer, or as a polymath, you're no longer constricted to a certain frame and to a certain context. And this is where you're like free to roam. You can go wherever you want to, and it gives a certain freedom that is very powerful. But it's also very challenging, especially in a world that calls for specialization, or up until now had been calling for specialization. Probably not so much in the coming decades or two. But
no, that's true.
The conversation that we had, it got me to think of this kind of dilemma between going and merging ideas and merging disciplines and connecting the dots, and this necessity to have something that is structured, something that is stable, something that is built on specialization and expertise. Have you ever felt this conflict between those two approaches, or were you ever compelled to kind of go in one direction and not in other? This is not a musical fun, by the way.
No. Yeah, there's always been a tension. Yeah, because I mean, like I said, essentially one aspect of me, I'm a people pleaser, and so, and I know that strangely upsets people if you're a polymath, because they can't quite identify that you're good at, like when I was a drama teacher, probably the best example of being constrained. So before that, I was a youth worker. Right. And I guess the good thing about being a youth worker is you're expected to be good at all sorts of different things, you know, not just one thing, to engage a wider base of young people as possible. And I did do drama with them, but I also did off-road motorcycling, because I worked with young offenders in partnership with police, and, you know, whatever you could lend your hand to, and, you know, you did it well, and you got recommendations as to how well you did stuff, and even did poetry with adults with poor mental health. Though there was a specialist who was a poet, you know, I was getting them to sort of release themselves and how they perform their poetry. That was, again, another example where I just went up to them and said, do you need someone who can help them express themselves? As I was at their launch for this charity, and the adults with poor mental health were like reading so nervously, and their hands were shaking like that I was thinking, that's not actually going to help their mental health performing it. It's going to damage it, because you could see they're just clamming up. And they came back to me. This is the irony, because I've never done that before. But they came back to me and said, yeah, actually, we've consulted our clients, and we want you to run workshops to enable them to do poetry. And then from there, we went into schools and then taught in Edinburgh in Scotland, using the adults with mental health conditions to then use their, so these adults they couldn't do it in front of each other, and then got to the point they were going around schools doing it, talking about their mental health and sharing their poetry. So it got from 0 to 100 miles an hour type stuff. But when people put the constraints, and that was a good example of where there's no constraints, because the manager in charge of that charity really believed in what I could do. And you need other people to have that belief and want it to happen. In school teaching, it was completely different. So I went into school teaching after like, you know, 3 or 4 years of youth work, because that's the way the climate was going. So if you weren't qualified, people were starting to advertise even youth work jobs that you had to have a teaching degree or a youth work degree. And it was like, it was squeezing out people who were really good at it, but didn't have a degree in it. You know, and I haven't got my whole life to keep doing degrees every time I do something, you know. So yeah, I decided, well, I met my wife around about then, and she wanted to leave Edinburgh because she couldn't get a job. And she was a qualified teacher, and I was being offered work left, right and centre. And I think maybe part of that is the polymath aspect. So I was offered a job as a support lecturer in a college, and never worked in the college before, or as a lecturer. And bearing in mind, as a youth worker at the time, I wasn't a teacher. And I was offered a job. I was a student in this guy's class, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, I want you to apply for the job. I said, what job? I want you to be, you know, assisting me, because it was the class was, there's a thing called men and childcare at the time. And so I did a childcare course that was funded by Men and Childcare, because we need to have more male role models in childcare. It's mostly female, and you think about, you know, young people need both role models, and particularly boys need you need both role models, regardless of what gender you are. But you know, if there's no men in your life, then it can be a skewed perspective. And I'm from a single parent family, so I do understand that. So I was just a student in the class, and he passed me, of course, but he said, you're really good. Your answers are spot on. He said, you should be applying to be a lecturer here. You know, I was a student at the time, you know, and he kept pestering me. Every time I hadn't even finished the course. I was like halfway through the course, right? And then he kept saying, you know, have you applied? Have you put your application in yet? Have you put your application in yet? But I didn't go for it because my wife said, you know, it wasn't fair that I was getting all this work and she wasn't, which I understand. You know, you don't want to be stuck at home not doing anything. So I said, there's no point us leaving Edinburgh if I end up being unemployed in Kent, which is where we currently live. So I said, if we both move, let's both move to both being employed. And so I went down. We had a job interview at my first school. And I thought, if anyone's going to take someone who's unqualified and stuff, then all credit to them. And so she got the job because she's a qualified teacher, and they gave me a job as a drama teacher there at my first school. And so this is coming back to that sort of narrow way of thinking. And it doesn't matter how many years of youth experience I had or how good I was as a youth worker. I had the head of department wanted me to throw any knowledge I had out the window. And it had to be done exactly how he wanted it done, to the point it was actually detrimental to the students' learning. There's no one getting, and one of the things he said, because we all had to do English and maths as a government directive, and it still exists, we had to reset English and maths to make sure that teachers had a high level of English and maths to support students, which sort of makes sense, because if they're struggling with English or maths, you can help them even though you're doing drama, to support them in any subject. And so, yeah, I got a good grade in maths as well. And he said, oh, that's impossible. And I said, why? And he said, and bearing in mind, this is a drama teacher, and his background, he'd been an English teacher for 10, 15 years, right? He'd then gone into being a drama teacher, never acted, never run shows outside of school. And he was telling me, and I remember I used to be a professional actor, and I'd done theatre, television and radio, voice work and stuff. So he was telling me that actors can't be, drama people are not allowed to be good at maths. And he was angry with that. He was actually a bully, real bully. And actually, I won't say his name, but it was later discovered that he was a paedophile as well. So, which is probably why he was bullying, right? So it was a control mechanism. Sorry for disclosing that on, but it's true. This is the things that you come across, and I'd never come across stuff like that before. But but yeah, he was very determined. His sense of identity was a very sort of two-sided coin, and this is what you have to be, and you've let the side down. So he ended up, I think he didn't just bully me because I was good at maths. So I think he bullied me because I, before I came down, there was a charity that I was asked to be on the board of directors for that was about supporting people who are adults who are survivors of sexual abuse. And he saw that on my CV. Yeah. And he kept asking me questions about that. He says, how do you know what a pedophile looks like? I said, you don't, because they're just like any regular person, right? I can't tell what that is. Now, because he did get convicted, now I understand why he's asking me those questions. And so he tried to get me sacked. So he kept saying he's not a good enough drama teacher, and because I actually qualified on the job. So I remember studying at Canterbury Christ Church University. There's a thing where you can actually learn on the job. It's called a graduate teacher program. So you get the university, you go to university lessons on the theory of teaching and pedagogy and all that, and then you apply it. And in some ways, I think that's if I didn't have an environment where I was being bullied by somebody, I think that's one of the better ways of learning, because you're actually applying it as you're teaching this, and then you go off and get refreshed, and it gives you that invigoration. And I remember, I still passed in spite of, in fact, they told him off because he was making stuff up and he had no evidence for it. And I had other people who observed my teaching and said, he's a good teacher. And he kept trying to say he's a terrible teacher.
No, but he's good at math. He can't be good at drama. This is math.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he felt intimidated. Yeah, well, because I'm from an acting background, and how can you be? He said you're going to learn everything you can about teaching from me. He said, so that's just arrogance. I wouldn't say to someone you can learn everything about teaching from me. It's even if I was a good teacher, I think none of us are completely good because we're human. You're always trying to learn to better yourself, but not better other people. But yeah, I had to leave school teaching because I went to another school, and this is a good example of this, and this might really illustrate your point. Right. So at that first school, and this partly illustrates it as well, I'd asked to teach media, and they said, no, you can't teach media. You're an English teacher. Oh, no, you're not an English teacher. You have to be qualified as an English teacher. You're qualified as a drama teacher. You can't teach media. Okay. So I went to my second school, and there I was teaching performing arts, which is a bit broader than just drama, and you could teach the older students as well. And I remember being told that I wasn't allowed to help with the lighting because I wasn't head of department, even though I'd worked professionally in lighting, and the head of department didn't know anything about lighting. So I didn't know anything technical. So I went, okay, that's fine. And then, and bear in mind, this is my third year of teaching, right? So, so I'm still quite new. They asked me to join a program where I could become head of department and get my master's in education. And they were going to fast track me up through that process. You go to become head of department and then head teacher. So it's one of those sort of programs. And I've only been teaching a couple of years at that stage. I turned them down, and I think because I said I want one more year of teaching before I go into management, because I don't really feel that you can actually manage something, other people doing something, if you I've only just graduated. I've only just qualified as a teacher because it took 2 years on the job to do that. And they didn't like that as a response. And that's, again, that sort of pigeonholing that you have to be I always said was wait a year. I just want to get used to the students in your system in the school. So drama covers, in the UK, drama covers English. This should not be a surprise. When we study Shakespeare in English classes in schools in the UK, Shakespeare was a dramatist, right? He's a storyteller. And I remember going to the head of English in the school, and I said to her, look, because this is my first year at that new school, and I said, right, what would be really good, is I could teach them the practical aspects of the plays that you're covering, because drama didn't have a curriculum, whereas English did. Okay, so we're allowed to write our own schemes of work. So that's basically the plan of the whole education thing and all the lesson plans. So I had free form to write what I wanted to write. And so I said, look, if you tell me the names of your plays that you're studying per year group, so year 7, year 8, based on their ages, then I will write my schemes of work around that and support you. And then hence, you know, Shakespeare wasn't really designed to be read. You know, you understand it through performance and also watching. But then that will help them have a better understanding of the text. And then you're teaching the understanding of the text, which will help them better with the performance of it. And then we can work in partnership that way. Anyway, she refused. And I said, she said, no, I can't do that. And she said, no, I haven't got the time to do that. I said, oh, sorry, my fault. Maybe I wasn't very clear. I wasn't asking you to write my curriculum for me. All I just want to know is the names of the plays. You know, so it's not, just put in an email, 1 minute, boom, because the names of each play that you're the head of English type thing. I wasn't being sarky, I was just being pleasant. So that's why I went to the head of English. What are the names of the plays in each year and stuff, just quickly, and I'll write it and I'll send it to you and show you what we're doing in drama and stuff, and then work together. And she said, no, I haven't got time. Now, I'm also, part of my personality is I know when someone's bullshitting. If that makes sense. Sorry for using the word bullshit.
That's a good alarm system.
It's good to be direct with these things.
Yeah. So, but then I was the junior in the school. And so I thought, well, she's blocking. And at the end of the day, we were trained as teachers. I'm a qualified teacher. And one of the things that we said is what we're trained in is we're preparing children to become adults for working life. It's a bit like the Hippocratic oath that that doctors have, is do no harm. Yeah. Whereas ours was prepare for adult life. And we're called in parentis locus, which means in replacement of parent, and the parent is there to prepare them for adult working life. And I was saying, why are we doing it? We're not really preparing them for adult working life, because in adult working life, you're multidisciplinary, you have to learn to work together. And so if school teachers aren't prepared to work together, how are we expecting children to work together in teams? So I did actually ask one of my students, I said, what are you studying in English? What plays do you do? Which is a reasonable thing to ask your students when you're teaching drama. And they told me. You can guess what I did next. So I wrote, so the students told me, because she's obviously too busy to tell me. So if she's too busy, I can just ask the students. She never said no, right? Get this. She wasn't honest. If she was honest, then we could have an honest conversation. She just said she was too busy. So I started teaching Romeo and Juliet to the year 7s, because that's what they're studying in English. Straight away, within the week, the head teacher came to observe my lessons. And we had this lesson, and I did I don't know, you remember Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet? Yeah. So there's the sort of gas station scene, and it's quite visceral and full of tension and stuff, and I love Baz Luhrmann's version of Romeo and Juliet, because he still uses the original language but puts it into its context of, this is essentially two gangs, So I showed them that excerpt, but also said, I want you to do your own version, but without the fights, because there's no fighting there, but the tension, and then put the tension into your language. And that's the weird thing in the UK drama system in schools, and I'll illustrate this because I'm a trained actor, is we expect them at a young age with their puberty to get up with barely any training in front of a class of 30 within one lesson to write script and perform it in front of their peers when they're going through puberty, and this is from the boys and girls. And we wonder why young people don't like drama, right? So I remember one of my cousins, or my cousin-in-law, my cousin's husband, he's an award-winning actor in New Zealand, and he came to visit me. He's now a teacher. He's now head of department in New Zealand for drama, but he wasn't a teacher back then. He came to visit me and here in the UK, and I was a teacher then. And he said, "Oh, what do you teach?" And I showed him. He says, "Really?" He said, "We didn't do all that in drama school. You know, how can you expect kids to do that within 50 minutes?" I said, "Yeah, well, that's what they expect here in the UK." He said, but really?" So yeah, so they had to do a little, they had to write this and perform it in front of their peers. And they did a really good job. And the head teacher, was going, and so as all observations go for teachers, you're meant to get feedback at the end of the lesson. And it's very brief feedback because you've got another lesson to teach, and it's an incredibly stressful thing. And you have to prep your brain for teaching something for another class. And he said, "Oh, that was a risk." And I said, "What do you mean? What? Because this is the feedback." I said, "What was the risk?" He says, "We did Shakespeare with them." And I said, "Okay, but that's on the curriculum for English. What's the risk? I don't understand." So, because they have to understand in English, and that's the curriculum set by the UK government. Well, why can't I do it in the classroom? And he said, "Well, they might not have understood it." Well, this really underlies this is wrong, isn't it? Because if you're teaching them this in English, why is that a risk for me to teach it in drama? Because they might not understand it because they're expected to understand it at that year group. It doesn't make sense. So I said, "Okay, but did you see that happen?" That was my direct question to him. I said, "Did you see them not understand it?" He said, "No, but that's besides the point." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "But they might not have." I said, "But the observation is actually on my lesson." And he said, I said, "Did they engage?" He said, "Yes." And he really didn't like saying it. I said, "Did they learn something?" "Yes." But okay, so what's the problem? And he says, "But they might not have. You took a huge risk." And so that really, in that one word, risk, sums up what bad education is about. Where we're measuring, we're not about educating, we're not about allowing young people to take risks in their learning, because that's how you learn. Like you just pretty much summed up how I've learned so much in my time, and so I take risks.
Yeah, you have the chance for failure.
Yeah, but if you expect, and I've got a lovely story for you about the chance for failure that was removed from that school. Completely removed from that school, and I'll give you an illustration for that. But yeah, you've got the chance for failure, and you've got to learn to fail. You've got to learn to understand what failure is about a learning opportunity to do better next time. So risk is a good thing. And a lot of, and I still do it, you get young people come to me who are unemployed and they won't take risks. And they've been conditioned, and I call it the condition, I don't blame them, but they've been conditioned to not take risks, and that they won't try something unless they're going to be 100% successful at it when they first start. Well, that's not true. That's not real life. No one's 100%.
It's never the case.
It's never the case. And I think it's not just school education. I blame media shows. There's reality TV shows where everyone seems instantly successful, and the press present, and social media. And I have actually asked them, I said, "What do you think is the real reason why you're like this and you've all got poor mental health? There's a real increase in poor mental health." And they said social media. Because to me, rather than me trying to go to conferences and guess what the problems are, why don't you just ask them directly? I've got access to them. Why don't you just ask?
You have the right audience in front of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Gather data.
Yeah, so they said social media, and it's true. Social media is about everyone presenting themselves risk-free and perfect and smiles and, "Oh, I did this and it's all perfect." But we got absolutely no risk there. And then, of course, if you do take a risk, or if you don't do something perfectly, you've got all this trolling and negativity and this hate-filled sort of environment of attacking. So people bullying, essentially. And I'm quite open that I've been bullied my whole life in different aspects. Not everyone bullies me, but and then there's things I need to work on to make sure that I don't get bullied.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah,
not everybody does that. That's an important thing to mention.
Yeah.
Well, I feel you have something that you want to share. I can sense that.
I can talk from
no,
the UK and the world over.
I'm really enjoying the direction that all of this is taken, because the main I say this all the time in interchange, that I am an engineer. This is not a statement of profession so much as a description of how I think, how my mind breaks down problems, how I perceive resources. Just phrasing it that way alone is already, that's how an engineer would do it. Nothing's good or bad in and of itself. You just have descriptions of how things are, and you have resources available to address problems if they exist. I'm not always good at identifying problems. This is part of why I became an engineer, is once they're pointed out, I've got tools, I've got talent, I can, I'm going to figure out. I may fail completely, but that possibility is where you learn. And that's one of the things that I've identified looking at education from the engineering perspective.
Yes.
Trying to break down the Finnish educational system and why it has had such amazing success over the years. That's the thing I hit again and again and again, is for whatever reason, the Finnish system is a little bit farther away from the classic and traditional viewpoint of there being a right and a wrong answer to everything.
Yes.
They're looking at things from a multidisciplinary perspective. They're trying to involve people who have experience in the field. They're not necessarily claiming to be experts. That's part of being a Finnish teacher.
That's key.
Right? Is making a deal with your class. Your class is there to learn. At the end of the day, whether there's a grade or not, if the goal is them learning, then they have to be involved. They have to be taking control of that process. They have to be managing their time and energy. So the teacher is effectively making a deal, trying to set a project, that there are goals. The project has to do these things. But other than that, it does not matter. What do you want to do with your time and energy? What do you enjoy researching or building or learning about? Great, make that part of your project. You'll design it. I, as a teacher, would be an advisor. So
exactly,
you come to me when you have a problem. Your parents back at home should be on the same page. And this is something, again, more common in Finland. They've got really strong unions. They've got really strong teachers associations. They've got parents who aren't worried about losing their job all the time and are getting a decent salary. And so when their kid comes home, they're not trying to be an expert in the subject that the child is learning about. They're just saying, hey, what did you learn about? Oh, you guys are learning about space. Well, there's this great program we could stream about, black holes. I saw a thing about it earlier. Would you like to do that with part of your evening? And that's suddenly a conversation between parent and child. And I love that you are showing this exact issue. And the UK educational system is one of the more traditional venues for education on the planet. It's one of the reasons why they're extremely respected, but at the same time, the rigidity.
It's incredibly rigid. And I think personally, it fails young people in prep. If the objective, actually it fails on both fronts. It doesn't qualify them, and it fails on the objective of preparing people for adult working life. If that's our overall, like you say, as an engineer, you look at the process and you look at the outcome and what's the outcome that you want to do the most efficiently. Exactly. And then you look at how do you look at that processes to make that the most efficient towards that outcome. And the education system here in the UK is based on tradition, not an efficient process, or even the outcome we want. It becomes hugely, because I've worked in prison as well. And I guess that's a unique thing about me as an educator, is because I've seen it right from what they call cradle to death, I guess.
Yeah, cradle to grave.
Yeah, that's it. I've seen the end result of a failing education system and where people end up. I'm not totally blaming education, but there's one really strong factor, and it's being proven sociologically a strong factor towards criminality, is a lack of access to good education. And yeah, hence why I worked in prison education, and to see the changes in people's behavior and their self-awareness when they become more and more educated is really enlightening. It's great to see that change. But why do we have to wait to put those changes into the prison system? Why can't we do that a lot earlier, before someone's committed a crime? You know,
Exactly.
to help them to think flexibly. And I will say this one thing, that comment you said before about the sort of very single-minded thought process, right? You're in this bracket and you can't flex out of it. That is also true of people in prison. That's why they're there. So they're told their whole life that you are this, and you can only do this, and you're not allowed to do anything else, you know. And when I taught them drama, and I also taught them media, and they found they were good at something else apart from criminality. And you can start to see their self-esteem start rising. They go, oh, I'm actually quite good at this. And if initially is that fair, they don't want to do it because it's like, oh, you know. But, you know, once you encourage them to push past that fear, there's one lad, right? So I was teaching photography, and, you know, it's a qualification. So you had to pass certain standards. And he wanted to bail on me. He said, I'm not doing it. And I can't do this unit. I've never touched a camera in my life. I've been in prison 15 years because it's a high security prison full of people who have done things ranging from murder, quite a few murders at all, drug dealing, armed bank robbery, all that sort of stuff. Hostage taking, had a hostage taker, assassin. Yeah, anyway. So for his one, I can't remember, it was bank robber or something like that. So he was very creative, but to learn, and in photography you got to learn the manual controls of, it's not point and shoot. So, you know, aperture, shutter speed, you know, exposure triangle and all that, and as well as composition. So I taught all that. And now, bearing in mind, we're in a prison. They can't go outside to take photographs of landscapes, right? They can't go off to the local art gallery to be inspired by other creatives. They haven't even got access to the internet. A really hard subject to teach in prison, right? And we had to get them to have 2 portfolios of work to pass, so 2 distinctly different portfolios, so 2 genres. So I said, well, okay, the easiest one is to do portraiture, because you've got access to other prisoners. And I made them, I said, you haven't got an option, you sign forms and stuff to disclose, allowed to do it. The images never left the prison, apart from the exam board. But yeah, so you have to pose for each other. And then the second one, what can we take photographs of? We just got my classroom, right? We're not allowed to take the cameras out of the classroom. So I said, well, actually, that's not a bad thing, because sometimes when people get so much access to choice, they stop being creative. When we've got confines, you've got limitations as to what you can do, you start finding more creative ways to solve the problem. So I said, your brief is to take photographs of my classroom and make it look interesting. Okay? It's up to you. And I did demonstrate, yeah, I did throw a few ideas in that I could think about. But anyway, I just kind of, and that's part of the reason for the panic. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's just, yes, you can. I believe in you. You can do it. You're creative. Right? You can do it. Anyway, he submitted his portfolio, and we get that. There's, you probably have this as well, moderators. So basically you have an external moderator that's attached to the exam board, and they'll go through and stuff and make sure that's this, because you give the grade and then they make sure it's to the standard of the grade that you give, right? And so he got that, you know, a real good grade, or the pass, you pass them or fail them, and they moderate it and check. And he sent this glowing report back. He said, this portfolio would not be out of place in a professional photographer's portfolio. And I showed this man who wasn't young, but I showed this man, you know, he's about mid-30s. I showed him this, and he'd been in prison and out all his whole life. And you just, I think he almost cried, you know. And he has a son. He had a son, and he was so proud. And he said, normally on visits and stuff, and you know, he's a father, and there's nothing in common they can talk about. You know, you can't talk about crime. Okay, you don't want your son to go into it. And he learned that his son was studying media at school. He's doing the same qualification. His son was doing exactly the same qualification he was doing in prison. So his son was doing the same media course. And he said, I've got something to talk to my son about on the phone. And he was so, you see him just light up, you know. And it's like, oh, I can talk about cameras and exposure settings and give my son some tips. And he felt like a father. You know, and we have to treat, you know, people, you know. So guys, I used to do a family relationships course in prison as well. And I think, you know, and when you're just targeting the one thing and you're just doing this, that's horrible. It's just a horrible approach. You know, you have to be a better parent. You know, who's ever going to respond better to that? You know, you're not going to respond well to that. But as you focus on other things, you can embody and embed those other, you know. So if you did a thing about, and often the men would say this to me. In fact, the psychologists, we have clinical psychologists attached in the prison, and social workers and stuff. And so they'd come back to me. I had one man who was one of the most dangerous men in the prison. I was told by another tutor not to teach him. You know, I can't see why you're teaching him because he's so dangerous. You know, do you not know his crime? I said, well, I'd rather not. I'm here to help educate so people can be rehabilitated. It doesn't make any difference to me. I'm assuming they're all dangerous because it's a high security prison. It's got a bad reputation. So I'm assuming they must be all dangerous to one degree. Why should I see him as more dangerous than somebody else? So just treat them all with respect. So so I still taught him. He was in my drama class. And yeah, I could see he had an edge. And the guy was great. He was great. And I learned a lot from him as well. But I remember knowing the huge breakthrough we had. He came to me one day and he said, Lance, you got me thinking. He said, I usually go to parole telling them that I'm ready to be released and I'm a good family man. I've got a son outside and all that. And he said, it's not true. I'm not ready. I'm dangerous. And that hit me. You know, that really hit me, that this guy was being really, he became aware of himself through doing drama. And he said, you've given me exercises to do, and you've made me try to act other characters other than the dangerous person. And he said, I'm really struggling with it. And it's really made me, because I've gotten to play victims. So you could understand, not because it was a rehabilitation thing, we're just doing a scene and say, okay, you can be the victim and he can be the aggressor, because that's what drama is. It's about conflict and how you resolve that conflict. And he couldn't do it. And he came to me and he said, I need help. And he told me his whole life story there and then. And this is a hard man. This is someone who's done really horrible stuff. And he told me his story. And I remember the counselor, the prison counselor, said, we've been trying to get him to come to us for like decades. What is it that you do in your class? You know, because he's actually now coming to us and saying, I want some help. We can't just release people into society just as hardened as they were as they came in. You know, and I got great respect for the man because he started changing his behavior towards others. You know, to start with, it was pretense, not after my class, but to start with, when he came to me, he thought he was respected in the prison, and his behavior was a certain thing. So he had a pretense on. And then I said, with drama, we can't have these masks on. I don't put labels out there. I just say that generally. And I said, I understand for your safety, you have to put those masks on and being hard, whatever it is that you need to. I understand, because you get stabbed if you didn't. But in here, we have to be human and we have to be honest and we have to be real. and because otherwise you can't put another character on if you already got one on.
Yeah.
And that was instinctive. That I did no training. I did no. I did read a couple of books, but some exercises were in some books. But there's no manual on how to teach drama in prison, and other than prescriptive ones. So yeah, I mean, sometimes part of life is just to be human and to encourage and enable humanity in other people.
What's interesting about this?
Yeah, sorry.
Is because I really want to kind of highlight it, because it's so part of the story that sometimes we just need to highlight it so that it appears also from the angle of the essence of the idea, not just from the essence of the story. And what's really impressive about this is that we talked about education, traditional mechanism, and one way of looking at things and one way of doing things. And this is just the one path, kind of the one way kind of path. There's just this one way that we need to take, that we need to walk on, and that path will lead us to X, Y, Z. It could be different from one person to another. In the case of people who end up being in prison, it takes them to positions where they feel stuck.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. Once they feel stuck, they need to do something to unstuck, to get out of this place where they're in. And without the right environment, this ends up being destructive.
Yes.
For them and potentially also for others. Thus the dangerous spot. It's destructive for them and for others at the same time.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is that if we put aside the traditional way of doing things, i.e. there's one way of doing things, i.e. there's one way out, which usually expresses itself in this is wrong, this is bad, you need to make a choice. That doesn't function, because it's really not self-evident. That choice is not self-evident when the mindset that calls upon this unilateral way of thinking is in place. When that mindset is in place, it just doesn't work that way. The alternative is not to tell people what to do, not to tell people what's right and what's wrong, but to create an environment where they become self-aware. And that's a discussion that we also had last time with Lana about learning experience design and about community design. And that one very important element when it comes to this is these check-in moments that you have with yourself that allow you to be more self-aware. And that self-awareness brings about all the things that you want to discover about yourself and later on potentially change about yourself. And it's this process of growth that allows you to get out of this place where you're stuck, not just for prisoners, but this is for every single human being on planet Earth. It's the exact same experience, but in different, lived in different ways, and that leads to different outcomes and different results. So that, I think, is absolutely essential to distinguish between one way of doing things, which is the unilateral approach, and creating a space where you have all these multilateral perspectives that can emerge. It can be a bit chaotic, thus angels of chaos, but it's also very interesting because it allows for so much self-awareness. The question is, I have a question that is very, very important, which is when we have, because you've worked with prisoners, you've worked with young people, you've worked with older people, you've worked with schools, you've worked with people from diverse backgrounds, you've worked with neurodiverse, you've worked with people with disabilities, you've worked with all these individuals with a huge variety. So it's not just about the variety in disciplines, but it's also about the variety of profiles that you have worked with. And what I want is perhaps to get a bit of some time to reflect on the things that you perhaps would want to tell our audience about how through their difference, through their multilateral approaches, how through self-awareness, how through all the things that we've talked about and touched upon, how they can achieve something greater than themselves. Oh,
okay. Wow. How do they do it? Yes. Plot twist. I'll just try to unpick what you wanted me to answer there. There's a lot in that. Probably take several podcasts, I guess. But
Start with this one podcast, and then we'll see about the others.
I've struggled with my own self-belief in the past, so I understand that, like the essence of what we've been talking about, how education works in good education, isn't through extrinsic, and sometimes you have to, I'll be honest, sometimes you have to offer extrinsic motivation, of course, you know, but the full fruit comes from intrinsic, so internal motivation. And you're totally right. You have to create that environment where people feel safe to explore the inner. But part of that environment, as an educator and trainer, is to put extrinsic things in place to make sure, because if I was teaching an individual, that's different. But when you're teaching a group situation, you have to make sure there's confines and make sure there's a code of behavior where people respect each other. And of course, people don't automatically do that in my experience. You have to put that out there for them. As a youth worker, we used to get them to agree what those rules are. So that's still sort of extrinsic, but getting them to understand intrinsically what those rules are and what safe space do they want, you know, and I still think that's a good approach if you've got time. But once you've got that space, then people learn. And it's a bit like, I guess anyone who's heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that, you know, if you aren't in a safe space, you don't have your primal needs met. And I know there's lots of debate about what that triangle means. And of course, it's not as rigid as that. And I think it's flexible. But if you haven't got your primary needs met, you don't have that safety of learning that self-actualization, which is the peak of the pyramid. So if anyone doesn't know it, so you have to have your food and your water first, and then housing, and then, you know, loads of different layers up. And then the top one, once all those other needs are met, is self-actualization. You think of a pyramid as layers. So, I mean, I do think it's not as rigid as that, though, because, you know, I've worked with homeless people who don't have any housing, but we're providing them with food and water, and yet they've still got a deep need for self-actualization. You know, so I don't think that it has to go in that order, but I do think that the key thing is you have to feel safe, even if you're homeless, even if you're a war-torn country. I still think. Sorry, I forgot. Wherever you are,
not offended.
Good. That, you know, and I think this is part of that sort of linear thing, as we think, and I've encountered that they're homeless, their needs are housing, food, water first, you know, and clothing, and we can't do any creative workshops with them, because that's for people who are wealthy or middle class and are comfortable. And I said, well, no, let's give them the option. Don't you make that decision for them. And actually, there was a young lady. I'll give this as a great example, okay? So, because I can't actually dictate one thing for everybody, because everybody's individual. But I'll use her as an example. Right, she'd been abused. She was a drug addict, a heroin addict. And she'd been abused by a man, and I was a male staff member. So I wasn't attached at all to anything she was doing. So she'd only see female staff members there. But she saw me, you know, bleakly, you know, because I was working it was an emergency hostel. So it's not like permanent accommodation. So they are still homeless. So they're only allowed to stay there like 10 weeks at the most. And our job was to try and find them somewhere a bit more permanent. And there was like 6 females and 6 males, all in the same space, all with needs. And we're trying to keep them safe and try to do the work during the day. And then we do night shifts as well. And then check, as a dry hostel, we had to check for drugs, needles, alcohol, to make sure it's a safe environment for them. And so, you know, we know the clients, what we call clients, on a need-to-know basis of what their backgrounds are. So what I'm telling you now is what I found out later, more and more detail, of course, as I needed to. But I was doing these checks, so at the time I didn't actually know what caused her to be homeless. And so I was going around doing the room checks for the drugs and stuff, and making sure there's no damage, because they'll often damage their, like trash their rooms. And so I went into her room, and this is what you do daily. And there she had made, get this, you guys seen Wallace and Gromit? The plasticine or morph?
Yeah.
Wallace and Gromit, yeah. She had made
wonderful animation, stop motion.
Yeah. She had made a plasticine version of me and a plasticine version of the female, one of the female staff members. There's about 10 of us on the staff team. It was me and this and I was just honored. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful creation. I was so honored. And she, of course, with her background of men being abusive, right? Her first instinct was to go and destroy it because she thought she was in trouble. So she went, oh, I'm so sorry, and went to destroy it. I said, don't you dare. and she went, oh. And I said, that's beautiful. Don't you destroy something as beautiful as that. And I said, I'm so privileged you did that. And she did this little character show. And she said, I said, you've got talent. And it's the first time a man had ever said anything that wasn't obviously abusive or sexual towards her. That it was actually identifying that self-actualization in her, that she was a creative. So every worker had been saying, okay, you need to get a job, you need to get your accommodation sorted, your clothing, your food, all this, right? Next time I was on shift, she came to see me. Oh, no, that's right. No, I brought a book in. I had a book. I've still got it. She gave it back to me. But once she'd finished using it. But my wife had given me, as a birthday present that year, the making of Chicken Run by Aardman.
Yeah. Same company that
same company did Wallace and Gromit. And it was really big Chicken Run then. And so I took that in. We had no facilities there in the hostel for anything creative. So I took that in and I lended it to her. I said, look, I've got a book for you to borrow. You know, my wife gave it to me as a birthday gift, and please return it, of course, because I do want to read it myself. I haven't had a chance. But, you know, you were saying that you were struggling with the eyes. I was reading through the book and there's this chapter there about how you do the eyes, you know, and how she was like, she couldn't believe that someone was trying to help her for her, who she was, not her needs, so to speak, but for who she really was. Anyway, the next time I was on, and she was just, she told the manager and the other staff, her key worker, her female key worker, and we all had people who were key workers for, which means you're solely responsible for their outcomes. Anyway, so when she came, she got some accommodation, right? She had trashed it. She was in an abusive relationship. She trashed it. She was still on heroin. She'd gone to rehab and it hadn't worked. And she came back again, but this time a year later. But guess what? The first person she asked for was I on shift. She wanted to talk to me, right? Now that's a huge step for someone who's been abused by men, right? So she came to me and then, you know, apologized that she was homeless again and stuff. And I said, no, that's fine. Just get back on the horse. You know, you deserve to have a life. You know, that's not a life, is it? You know, and we all make mistakes. Just get back on the horse. And what happened is with the manager had managed to get her a place on an animation course, and she was so scared of it that she'd not turned up. Right, and you know, well, I'm going to be on an animation course, and I'm a junkie, and you know, this is how they talk about themselves. You know, and these people all from good backgrounds, I'm not, and so she didn't turn up. And I said, well, let's just try again. I'm sure the college will understand, you know. And I actually set up I set up an art group in the hostel shortly afterwards. She wasn't part of that art group, but I actually set up an art group where people would come. Initially, the staff didn't see the point of it. They said, what's the point if you do an art group? It's wasting money, it's wasting time. What you should be doing is getting on the phone, finding accommodation. I'll get back to this young lady, by the way. Let's put this into context. So you should be doing real work, not running an art group. Art, and I actually asked to do drama. I wanted to do a drama group with them. They said, no, drama's too dangerous. We'll do art instead. So Well, art is
How can
equally,
drama be dangerous?
I don't know, because it deals with emotions. We need to keep those emotions repressed. But we can send them to a counselor. We have to talk about their abuse. Doesn't make sense to me, but you know. So the young people would actually say to me, they say, we don't like going to, they didn't want to go to counselors because they say, I don't want to talk about my abuse.
Right.
Because it makes me remember it. And the reason I do drugs is to forget it.
Right.
So I keep going to the cycle of talking about it and then doing drugs to forget it. Because they came back really bad after each counselling session. I'm not saying all counselling's like that, but in this context, for them it was, right? They weren't given tools to cope, or they weren't spoken to their actual life. Who are you apart from, you're not just an abuse victim, you're not just a drug addict, you're somebody else. Let's treat people as if they're other things, and there will be those other things. If we just say you're a junkie, you're an abuse victim, there'll always be an abuse victim, there'll always be a junkie, if that makes sense, because you're labeling them as that, so they're going to be that. They've got no other option, they're going on that narrow path. Anyway, so I did this art group, and within a few months, one of the leads, he was like the team leader at the time. He was really anti it, me doing this art group. And then afterwards, he became my champion. And the reason he became my champion for doing it was he saw the change in the young people. So because it was quite a volatile place, you just imagine. So all sorts of things were going on, and we'd have to break up fights and stuff. And there's this rule that they all formed amongst themselves, right? When the art group is on, for the 2 hours that I did it, everyone had to behave themselves, because no one in the group wanted the disruption that I'd be taken off shift to then have to deal with stuff, right? So, or other staff had to deal with stuff. So whenever we had this art group on, everyone was like immaculate angels in this homeless hostel. And this is a brilliant story, right? So
you have to go back to the story of the lady, because
yes. Anyway, summing that up, so the staff would say, "I'm glad you're here. We're going to have peace for 2 hours." And it's not that everyone would turn up to the art group, but it's just that everyone was quiet while I was running the art group. It was a safe space. So coming back to this story, so this guy, sorry, I've got to tell you this one. It's just very quick. So there was a moment the police turned up to arrest somebody in my art group, and they so Lothian and Borders Police, Edinburgh Police. And I ended up working with them after I worked at this hostel in partnership with them. But they came in to arrest this young lad who'd taken down this station for questioning, and he was a prime suspect in something. And the hostel worker said, "No, you can't do it. You have to wait till the art group finishes, because it's sanct to sanct, or whatever they say. It's like Brilliant. No one's allowed to interrupt the art group." So the police officers had to wait an hour, until I'd finished, and then the lad went out and they quietly walked him off site. So even the police respected it. It was just amazing. I don't know if that would still happen today, but yeah. So this guy that was really anti me doing this art group, he was recommending me everywhere he could find, right? So the people that were running the hostel, they had other projects, and he'd been promoted to other projects himself. And so I was actually asked to run a 12-week program, the art program in the community for people who are homeless.
Lance, the lady, don't forget
the lady.
Yes,
no, this is it.
Oh, this is it. Okay.
This is it. Yeah. So I'd lost contact with her, and before then she was all wearing black and very pale skin and stuff, and she looked very sick. And she came in, I didn't recognize her, right? So she came in, and in fact I was so busy, because my wife's a qualified art therapist, so I got her to run it, but I structured it so it was still the same sort of thing. So I wasn't actually there for all the sessions, and I'll just come in at the start, in the middle, and the end, just to make sure it's on track. And so I got my wife working for me, with the permission of the charity. So I was doing it self-employed at that stage. So yeah, I was trying not to say her name, because but I still remember her name. And she came in, and I remember I came in on the sessions to see how things were doing, and she recognized me, and she said, "I want to thank you so much." She I think she'd been to college. She passed. She'd had her tenancy she hadn't trashed anything. She was out of abusive relationships. She was wearing color, right? She had color to her face. She was like a transformed person. And she says, because you believed in me. You believed, you saw who I was, even when other people couldn't. And I think if you can, if you're in that situation that she was in, if you can surround yourself with people that believe in you, you know, that happened to me. I had people who believed in me when I didn't. And that's partly why I do what I do now, is I had people that, even if I couldn't see it, they could see it. And they believed in me and took me under their wing and you know, mentored me informally, you know, and sometimes we lose trust in people and adults or other people because we've had bad experiences, but actually all that does is harm yourself and harms your future. You got to learn to, of course, be discerning, but still be vulnerable enough to trust other people that they can mentor you and allow them to say the good things into your life. And if there's anyone being that horrible person, you can just move on from that, you know, and take that. That's a risk. That's a risk to be vulnerable enough to allow someone to mentor you and to believe in you. And I know what it's like as a person to be defensive and to put up barriers and these self-protective barriers that we put up, actually, they don't protect us. They end up damaging us because they stop us receiving true love. We think they're protecting us from attack, but actually they do stop us receiving genuine love from other people, kind people that aren't doing it to get anything from us. They're doing it because they actually really like us and they believe in us.
Yeah. It's right back to that, right back to what you've described as a people pleaser. Nobody knows you, so nobody likes you.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
giving people that opportunity to be genuine, to love and be loved, I think is essential to this process. Fantastic insights. I want to.
It brings us back, just one thing, it brings us back to also something else that we were discussing in the previous episode of Interchange. And it was a discussion around Rumi. And Lana, when she quoted Rumi and said, wounds is the place where light comes in. And that is the art of vulnerability. And Brené Brown has a lot, there's this incredible TED Talk and the books and all the other TED Talks that emerge from it by Brené Brown around the art of being vulnerable and the courage that it takes to be vulnerable and to accept that vulnerability as a springboard for something better for yourself, but also could be also for others as well. Because once you accepted your position of vulnerability, you invite others into that space and you create a safe space. And in that safe environment, you can finally reach a better understanding of who you are and a better understanding of other people and get to a high level of self-actualization. And another thing that is very relevant to what you said about counseling is there are so many different ways of coping, and there is no one way to do things. And this is where we go back to the idea of the multilateral versus the unilateral. There are so many different ways that function with so many different people, but there is no one thing that functions for everybody. And one very important component of the process, which is based on Viktor Frankl's theory, which is logotherapy. And there's this amazing book by Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, which is inspired by his experience of the concentration camps. And the big question is, how did you survive concentration camp? How were you capable of coming back after so much damage done psychologically? And the answer was logotherapy, the talk that you talk to yourself, this ability to create an identity, to design an identity that is independent from the label that has been given to you. And I think that is critical for any process of growth. And it really answers the question of how can we as individuals, whoever we are, reach a better version of ourselves and really be able to achieve something that is greater than what we thought we could achieve.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. It's not about, I mean, I think people mistake it as ego, and I think humility is also gets a bad rap, in the sense humility is not thinking of yourself as worse than other people, and having pride in yourself isn't thinking of yourself better than other people.
Yeah.
So that this is where both those words get a really bad rap, because they're sort of misjudged. You know, the state that we need to be in is when we think of ourselves as better than we used to be. We should not be comparing ourselves to other people, whether it's like I'm worse than other people or I'm better than them. It's both the bad aspects of the same continuum. And it's a constant battle. I mean, one thing I did learn in for myself as well, you know, you have to, because we have egos, we all do, you know, we all have a sense of self. And I think part of it, this is why I find that really difficult to answer, who am I? Because in some aspects, yeah, that can change. But something I learned in prison education was something called pro-social modeling. So then this is one of the problems with, I mean, I believe in pro-social modeling, by the way, and there's something really interesting. So in education, we tend to, and we see our politicians and everyone do this. They say one thing, but do a completely different thing. And the more we see this, and this is something I learned in public health as well, that one of the problems we have, these issues around the world, is the more people see the differences between this lack of social justice, of the powerful who have control are saying you must do this, but they're not doing it themselves. You know, say take the environment or all sorts of things. You know, so it's everyone else's responsibility, but the powerful, you know, who have power and have more control over the impact that they have on the environment. And of course, my environmentalism comes from having studied horticulture and coming from New Zealand, but I'm quite proud of that aspect. But yeah, so coming back to pro-social modeling. So what's pro-social modeling? Well, if you really want to change behavior in other people, and you can only give the sort of environment for that to change. But of course, in prison education, the objective is to change behavior. If you really want to change it, you have to change that behavior in yourself. So if you want to stop someone being antisocial, you have to be pro-social. And what that means is you have to respond in the way that you want to be treated. And it really essentially goes back to the sort of that quote that Jesus said, treat others how you like to be treated yourself, essentially, you know. So I remember this young man that, you know, and I don't want to generalize, but, you know, this was an adult prison, so you had to be 21 the youngest, and usually that come from a YOI, so youth offenders prison. They come in and all really bolshy, and he was like that, and he'd come in and he didn't want to learn, and he was really aggressive. And I remember at one point I was trying to teach him, you know, some of the technical stuff with media, and he was ignoring it, and I do my own thing. I said, well, you can, but there's reasons why it won't work, and you know, if you do this will help. And he kept fighting it. So I said, well, actually, if everything you do is 100% perfect, I said, I think there's a point where you don't need to do my class, because you keep telling me that you know more than me and that you could teach this better, and why are you coming? If you know more than me, why are you coming?
Yeah,
you know, you don't have to come.
You can only encourage with an environment and empower people. I think we've got to push things forward.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Oh,
the
the short version is even though he's aggressive, I always treat him with respect, and you know, and a year later, he's still in my class, by the way, at that point. A year later, he was saying, can I have this? And yes, please, and thank you. Right. And the prison officer came in and said, why are you talking to him like that? And you never say that on the wing, and you're aggressive and you're fine. And he says, because he treats me with respect. And so because he does that, I treat him with respect. Sorry, I just want to finish that story.
No, that's exactly the sort of message that I think needs to be out there. We're going to take it to a section that we call the Rapid 7.
Oh,
are you ready for it?
maybe not. It sounds like a game show, but go for it.
Right. It's a little bit like that. What we're going to do is we're going to go through and ask you a series of questions. Basically, they're one-word answers or yes or no's, and we'll just shoot through it pretty quickly.
I'm not good
see
at
how you do, see how you feel.
Yeah.
Room for failure. There's no, but there's no
fine.
failure. So we'll just do it and see how it goes.
Yeah.
You ready?
Okay. Yeah, trying to be.
No pressure. This is no pressure. I always love saying it, but yeah, let's jump right in. First question. Da Vinci or Michelangelo?
Well, Da Vinci, because I teach Da Vinci, so sorry, Da Vinci. So I'm biased.
Right.
But that kind of was the purpose of the question.
But he was a great inventor because he did invent stuff. He wasn't just an artist. He was an engineer.
So many different things. He's really the epitome of the Renaissance man and polymath. So makes perfect sense as well.
This is the rapid 7, remember.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Alexandra.
Favorite activity?
Oh, that's hard. Hiking. I think that's the first word that came into my mind. Hiking, yeah.
Nice. Describe the future in one word.
Ooh. Digital.
Describe the present in one word.
Archaic.
Describe your state of mind in one word.
My mind. Well, that's flexible.
And what would you consider to be your most inspiring art form?
Oh, that's so hard. So you're asking a polymath. So I can't do one.
How many?
Oh, there's too many. Well, I could go. I don't know. I think gaming, because it gets a bad rap, and I think it's got so much more potential than it has been given. VR, because you can really get into the sort of empathy of a story. But also art forms that haven't really been developed yet. So I guess for me, the most inspiring, and it's not one word because it hasn't been developed, but something where we can have films where traditional film and television is a linear narrative where someone else is telling you what to think and where to look. And it's edited, and I teach all that, right? But actually a story where you can actually be part of that story, make the decision of where you want to look and which aspect of the story you want to follow. I think you referenced that before at the start, the sort of
interactive
movies.
Books.
Yeah, not just a game, but actual interactive movie. Because I used to read all those interactive books when I was a kid. So
nice.
Rapid 7, Lance.
Sorry.
Don't worry. An inspirational message or advice in no more than 5 words.
Treat others how you want to be treated.
That'll do.
Okay, stop counting.
It's close enough.
That was so fast. That was so fast. I thought this was going to take like, I don't know, 5 minutes to get to the 5 words. But we'll take that. We'll take that, definitely. And I think it really summarizes, it's crazy how things eventually connect together. Because what you said at the end is somehow the way we started at the beginning, which is with the idea of social justice. Yes. And I think we can really sense, we can really feel how that acts as a grand theme in terms of how things progress in your experience, in your life. But it's also a reminder for everybody out there to really get a sense of themselves and others, and that the coming together of the self and the others in a safe space, in a safe environment that caters for self-belief and that paves the way towards self-actualization. I think this is something that we desperately need, be it in education or outside the framework of education. So in education, it's absolutely essential to have that. Otherwise, we will continue nurturing individuals for very specific, narrow, tangible objectives without really allowing them to accomplish their fullest potential. And I think that if we have all the technology that we have access to in the present and that we will have access to in the future, but we still are not capable of making use of these tools, of making use of that technology in order to empower individuals to be who they are and all they can be, we are absolutely failing as a species.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
So we have all that tech in the world, but if not using it for good purposes, what's the point?
Exactly. This is the opportunity that we've got every day to break those molds, to remove these labels, these frames, these expectations, because we're all complex and we're all a little broken, and we're all doing our best to be better today and tomorrow than we were yesterday. That's all we can really ask.
Definitely. That's so true. You know, and we all have this quest to be we want people to listen to us, but we're not really prepared to listen to other people. You know, so it's really important. And now of all time, the world needs to listen to different points of view and accept differences, to listen so that we can be listened to. You know, it's it is a very divisive society, I find, at the moment. But if anything I can do to if just one or two people, you know, can become more cohesive, you know, in their lives, then that's just a blessing, isn't it? You know, it's good.
That's the dream.
That's the dream. So don't have to change the world, just have to change ourselves. We don't have to change the world, just have to change ourselves. That's all.
That's actually more than just a dream, because that is exactly what we're doing now.
It is.
It's not a dream. It's happening. It's reality. It's happening now. It's the present. It's the digital future, and it's the not so archaic present. So that's why we have set up actually interchange, because it's in the word interchange. So it's inside. Nice. It's a communication between two parties, but in this case three, and potentially more. It's process of change, so there's the change component in it, and if we don't allow for this interaction, we're not allowing for change to happen, because if it's just you and only you, and you're completely and you're rejecting every single opportunity to be open to new experience, to be vulnerable to what's outside, to be open to different ways of doing things, then there will always be one way, and that way will not change. So I think what the discussion here is really embodies the spirit of interchange. And as you said, if this discussion perhaps invited one person or two individuals to feel more cohesive, or to acknowledge themselves as they are, or to enhance their self-belief, or to feel a bit inspired by your experience, then I think we'd have done a pretty good job.
Yeah,
agreed.
Definitely. It's great podcast for that. So hopefully someone can feel encouraged by watching this. And I agree that transparency, because if you're not honest about your own struggles, then how do you expect to encourage other people to, you know, work through theirs? So that's really important.
Lance, I've got to thank you for being here and for your candor throughout this whole interview. It's a fantastic opportunity to get to meet you and get to understand a little better what you're about.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. It's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you as well. You know,
right?
So hopefully we'll have another time to discuss all sorts of things. Didn't even say about my book. That's a good example. So I was approached on LinkedIn, and I've never written a book before. So a publisher approached me and said, "Can you write a book for us?" I went, "Okay, let's give it a go." I'm petrified. I failed English at school, you know, but that's cool.
This is what editors are for. This will be good.
I got it. Yeah, that would be good.
The comeback of the writer.
Yeah. Well, that's what editors are for, as you rightly said. So, you know, it's you know, it's a team thing, and that's what's encouraging. They've been really good with the feedback back and forth. So
and can you tell us what the book is going to be about before we leave the Zoom?
Yeah, well, I guess so. I've signed a contract. So I'm not. Yeah, it's about. So they approached me to do a totally comprehensive training book around what we do with Resolve, and I said no because I didn't see the market for that because Black Magic already got books like that, and actually there's no such thing as a totally comprehensive book on it because it's such a fast piece of software. But I said, well, what about beginners? Because people who don't want to go into the film industry but still want to use the software. So we're working on that.
That sounds good.
But yeah, I can't. I probably said too much already. Yeah, but yeah, it takes time to write a book, so it's going to be a bit of an effort.
It certainly does.
Yeah, so at least I'm going to start soon in the next few weeks. So, but I use that as an illustration of, taking those opportunities even though you're scared of them. So I've been working with my businesses. I've been working with 16 to 24-year-olds who are unemployed for the last 4 years. And that's become quite a habit now. It's quite, well, not easy to do, but it's something I'm used to, if that makes sense. And I'm known for that. And sometimes we go into a rut because we just keep doing the same thing because everyone knows us for that. And we're used to it. It's safe and it's easy. And so to be then asked to write a book, which is great, because it's going to push me out of my comfort zone. And really, yeah, it's the next stage for me. So that's why I bring it up, is allow those opportunities to happen and say yes to them, even if they make you feel uncomfortable.
And I think that is a fantastic way to finish this fantastic podcast. Lance, I want to thank you so much. Every time it's an incredible conversation. It goes in all sorts of different directions and it's always unexpected. And I love that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, it's great that you love it. Yeah, this is who I am, really. But yeah. So, oh dear. Oh, it's great that I can just be me. And thank you for appreciating that. So, and thank you both to you, Alexandra and Paul, for I feel honoured to be invited to be part of your podcast. And hopefully this won't be the only one. It'd be great to maybe later ones have written the book, the experience of writing. Yeah.
Got to revisit.
That would be fun.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, well, I'll let you sign off or whatever you have to say. But thank you everyone for listening. Take care. Do I just finish? Do I finish or you kick me out or what?
I think you're doing a pretty good job of signing us out. That's pretty good.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Keep tuning in to Alexandra and Paul's podcast around all sorts of interesting conversations around the world and education and technology, and just to make the world a bit of a slightly better place in how we can in our sphere of influence. So until next time, goodbye.
That's better than our ending. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See, you're raising the bar. We're going to make all of our guests close it out from now on. That's...
yeah, that sounds a new thing. Okay, see you.
Goodbye, everybody.